Welcome Python students to your first file input-output lesson. In this lesson, we're going to start at the beginning with learning how to get file reading and writing finished, or I guess working. And I've listed a few comments on the screen to help you kind of direct your initial practice with this. I recommend that you pop open a new Python project and practice alongside me. At the core in Python, we actually have to just open up a link to a file with the method open. But inside of it, we have to provide two things: a file name and a access mode. And so here's a list of the access modes. If you put in an R for access mode, we are in read-only mode, a W is write-only mode, and an A is append mode. The difference between W and A is that W's write mode replaces all the content in the file, basically erasing everything that was there. Erases everything that was there already. Sometimes wanted, sometimes not. If it's not wanted, use the append mode to only write and append information onto what's already there. And then we have some functions that we have for reading, returns. What did I do here? I pressed something funny in my project. This just returns whole file. While file. It returns the whole file. That threw me off, the typo. And read lines returns one line of the file, and read lines, plural, returns all the lines in a list format. One line per entry in that list. And we also have a piece of functionality called write, and this here writes the listed string to the file directly. And we're able to actually do some more things with reading and writing, but we'll get there shortly. So the first thing that I would like us to do in this project right now is we're going to split these two things up into classes. We're going to start with the writer class, and inside it, we are going to create a definition for a write to file method. And I want this just to have self in it, but I want to also have some information about what to write. And two things that I need when I write to a file are a file name and some string data. I'm just going to call my variables those names for now. And what I need to do in Python to be able to get my writing up and running, at least in the tightest way possible, is to create a try except block. And in the except, I have an IO error. And I'm just going to print out here error writing to file, and then maybe I add on the file name at the end here. So I'm going to try to access and work with this file, but I'm going to have this error caught if I need to. Now, there's a couple ways that we're able to actually write to files, and no, we'll just stick with the main best strategy for now. Actually, let me show you both. I'm changing my mind here too much. The first thing that I could do is simply just create a reference to this file by running my open method on it. And like I show above here, our open method needs two things. It needs a file name, and it also needs a access mode. Since we're writing to a file, I'm going to put in W for writing. I've now built access to this file. The problem is that if I open access to a file in Windows, it becomes secure and locked unless I release it. And to release it, I have to do something called, well, close the file. And so one strategy for doing this is there's actually another layer to a try except block, which is a finally statement. Let me spell it right. Finally means once everything else has been tried or accepted, do this last. It's basically like an else statement in an if-else chain, but customized for a try except block. Finally, I'm going to take my file and I'm going to close it. And that's going to prevent my file from not being accessible afterwards by other things. So the first strategy is to open the file and then to close it at the end. And now you'll see if I press file here and I hit dot, I have some access to different functionality in the file. However, there's a strategy that's a little bit more succinct and a little easier to work with. That doesn't even require us to close it, that I'm going to teach you and that we're going to work with in this section. And it looks a little bit different than this layout. It looks like this. We are going to say with open and then the file name and the write access as writer. This is a Python specific logic structure that's saying I am going to be opening this, I'm calling it writer, but I only want it to exist during the runtime of this section. So that means that this with statement, once it's complete, it's going to close the file automatically. I don't have to worry about this finally close thing ever. I just have to write it like this, and I'll have this writer now available to use, and it will close itself once the logic is complete, which is pretty useful. And so what can I do to write to this file? Well, I'm going to take my writer, and I'm going to type in write, and see that I have some options. We're going to talk a bit more about some of these a little bit later, but right now I'm just going to write my string data to the file. So let me pop over to, well, actually, let me show you here. How do we track down where this file is going to be written to? Well, if I go up into my project root folder and right click and go show in Explorer, it's going to pop open a reference directly to this project folder, and I'll open it up. And in here, you can see, I already have some things I tested before, so I'm going to close those up. I have this runner, which is the py file I'm working in, and I have this other file we'll look at really soon, but there's no actual file that I've created yet with a custom file name. I haven't even actually written anything here. So this is the directory. All of our files are going to be saved. It's the root base directory of our project. If I wanted to save it in a different spot, I'd have to like specify the file actual directory address there. But luckily, we can just name the file directly and have it in our root project folder to make it really easy to work with. Let me show you what I mean. First, I'm gonna make a writer, based off of my writer class. And now in my writer class, I have access to my write to file method. Perfect. I have to give it a file name. I'm gonna call this my test file. And I have to make sure I say .txt. Otherwise, it's gonna be created as just a typeless file that is not gonna be very useful to open in programs. And second, I need some string data. Here is my first text. And now that this is set up, I can simply run my Python application, and we're going to see what happens. Process finished. Let's tab back over and see that we now have a test file built into our file folder structure. And if I open it up in Notepad++, I see here is my first text appearing in this file. Awesome. So I've got some file writing up and running. Let's add another class to get some reading up and running. Actually, you know what? Before I do, don't get ahead of yourself, Mr. L. Let's talk about one other option, one other thing about writing to file. Before I do, I want to see what happens if I write to this file again. Let's write to file, this test file.txt, and I want to say here is more text to add to it. And extra bracket there for some reason. And writing to this file. Okay, let's run this. Control-Shift F10. My first text, and here's more text to add to it. Let's go over and open up my test file again, reload it, and it just says, here is more text to add to it. Even though I thought I wrote to it twice. Well, the problem with this is I'm using this W, write-only mode, access mode, which erases everything that was there already every time I write to it. So I'm overriding the file information when I do this twice. So I need another option that provides me the actual append ability. So I'm actually going to change the name of this to write over file. And I'm going to create another method, copy and paste the contents, called write to file. And in this case, I'm going to let this be an append type. Now, I could have made options, some conditional logic within one method and branched out, but I like to make two different ones here. A write over file and just a write to file with the append method here. So now the write to file, if I run this, we should, if we tab over and reload this, see, here's more text to add. Here's my first text. Here's more text to add to it. Why is this here? Well, because the file originally had that, and I just appended these two files to it. Let's just make it really clear. I'm going to delete the contents and then run this one more time, load it up. Here is my first text. Here is more text to add to it. So awesome. Both messages are added there, but I do also notice that they're on the same line. What can I do to add an extra kind of space in here? Well, I can add a new line command. In fact, it's always a good idea to kind of do this at the end of each one that you add. So now when I run this, I have, oops, I forgot to delete the contents here. Let's delete it, run it again. And there we go. Here's my first text. Here is more text to add to it. Wonderful. So we're able to print out to a file using this writer And the two different options I have for either replacing data or appending data. Let's also add actually let's do this down below here, just for clarity for now, a class reader to read from a file. And in this, I'm going to define a method called read from file. And in it, I want to be able to access a file name for this reading. And similar to above, with this type of structure, I'm going to say to try and accept, and here an IO error, and print and say unable to read from file, comma, file name. There's the error printed out, and I'm going to try with open, but this time my file name, my file name will be a read access type as reader. So I have a different type of functionality going on with my open method. And so now that I'm able to open this and call it the reader, this is the object that I've created to read with, I'm going to be able to, let's just have this populate properly. I want to be able to just read the contents from this file. And, well, what am I going to do with this? Well, I'm just going to, why don't we just see what happens? I'm going to go data equals reader, and I'm going to print this data once it's been read from this file. So let's give this a try and just see what happens. Down here, procedurally, I'm going to create a reader from my reader class. And I'm going to go, hey, reader, I want you to read from a file. And let's read from that test file.txt that we ran above here and see what happens in my console. Here's my first text. Here's more text to add to it. Here's my first text. Here's more text to add to it. So what's happening here is I printed out to it again. I forgot to comment this out up here. So let's, because I wrote to this multiple times to do it. Let's just, kind of fun. Let's run this when it's blank. So now it's only loaded one set of information. And now if I go down here, the printout is, here's my first text. Here's more text to add to it. So I see that when I read from the file, the data that I get is, well, it's all the data that was in the file at that point in time. So this is maybe like read all data from file is a better method for this. And let's look at one more option in this video. We'll do some more in the next one. Read one line from file. And in here, we'll have the file name like usual. And we're going to copy and paste this structure to save ourselves some time because we're really just opening it as a reader. But in here instead, we're going to read a line and print out this data. So instead of reading all of the data from the file, I want my reader to now read one line from my test file.txt. And we'll see what pops out here. Here's my first text. It's just a single line of information, and that's wonderful. So we have the ability to write to and read from files in a basic way. And in the next video, I'll show you how to add a little bit more complexity to this so we have a bit more customization over how we're ordering and structuring the content we're reading and writing.